Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. Hey friends, I have a special announcement. I am hosting 2 The Wilderness and the Word events in 2025, July 23rd through 27th and August 13th through 17th. These are Christian women's retreats in Eureka, Montana, with Audrey from the Trail North. Our goal with these retreats is to bring together a group of women who want to worship the Creator in His creation. Over these 5 days, you'll meet like-minded women who want to grow in community, worship in the outdoors, and challenge themselves personally. I can't wait to hang out with you, so shoot me an email at myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com for more information or the registration link. Spots are filling up, so make sure and reserve yours today. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Dana Mann. She is a wedding photographer from Jackson, Tennessee. She's passionate about developing authentic relationships in Christ and exploring God's creation. She has founded a community of photography retreats called Creatives for the Creator, where photographers can explore national parks, find rest, and find faith-filled friendships. Dana is on a continual journey of stewardship, utilizing her gifts in photography to glorify God and to uplift His people. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dana.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Super excited. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just so excited to share a lot of things that the Lord's been doing and what He's continuing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and just share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, like you said a little bit earlier, my name's Dana. I'm a wedding photographer. I've been doing wedding photography I'm in my 2nd year now. It's something that I've been doing since I was in high school. I didn't feel I was really gifted in that way. And I feel like it's definitely the photography, my career has definitely been a journey of God's faithfulness, of me not feeling good enough and then God coming in and being but this is, what I've given you to do. And these talents and these opportunities are from me. So I started in high school, didn't do much throughout college, and then started it up again. And the Lord just brought so much abundance through that. I primarily do weddings. I do some elopements, some families. I have a family session tomorrow I'm excited about, and things like that. I just kind of do everything because I feel like the Lord designed us for community and for fellowship and for connection and love. And I get to document that almost every day. Or if I'm not documenting it, I'm, editing and processing the photos. And it's just truly such a gift. And I live in Jackson, Tennessee, which is kind of in between Memphis and Nashville, with my husband, Jacob, and our dog, Bellatrix Mann. Yes, named after the Harry Potter character. But she's not mean like her. Anyway. And yeah, I think that's kind of basically it. I like to bake other than photography. I like to bake and read books.
Yeah. Is most of your photography local, or do you do a lot of travel photography, or kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mostly do travel since we just moved to this section of Tennessee a year ago. I have a handful of stuff that I do locally, but most are I'm driving either a few hours or I'm hopping a flight to a different state for. And I love to travel. I mean, that's the whole reason that I started these retreats. Well, I'll go into that later, but I love traveling. I love exploring God's creation. I love elopements, especially eloping on the side of a mountain. That's the dream right there. And documenting that is such a gift. But yeah, most of the time I'm either hopping on a flight somewhere or I'm staying home. It depends. Kind of 50-50 almost.
Yeah. So when you do get to travel for photography or even just for fun, what does that look like? What do you incorporate in your travels? What are kind of your hobbies when you're traveling?
I always love to go antique shopping wherever I am. If I get the opportunity to, sometimes if I'm traveling in for a wedding, it's like I fly there, then it's rehearsal dinner, wedding, and then I fly home. But I'm been trying to recently to expand the travel a little bit more and take advantage of the place I'm in and really explore. I love to go antique shopping because it kind of shows the history of a place, and I love old stuff. So I always like to get a souvenir that way. And if I'm somewhere like a national park, I like to explore there as well, take long drives. I'm less of a hiker, which I feel like is like blasphemous to say on this podcast. I'm not a very experienced hiker at all. I'm more of a driver or a walker, or sit down on a rock and enjoy kind of person. But I like to do that as well if I'm somewhere more scenic.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people like to go by foot. Some people like to go by car. Some people like to just sit and enjoy. And there's beauty in all of that. And I think we all could use a little bit different perspective sometimes. And some of us that really like to hike probably should sit on a rock and take in a little bit more sometimes, and vice versa. So there's no right or wrong way to experience creation. They are all beautiful in different ways.
So true. So true.
However, I have found that the reason I like hiking is because I get to see places that not very many people get to see because they cannot drive to them. And so you get away from the people a little bit more, and you get to see some things that you have to put in a little bit more effort to get to. And so, there's beautiful places though that you can drive to. And so, like I said, neither's right or wrong, just different.
Yeah. It's just got to be under 10 miles. Over 10 miles for a hike, I'm like, maybe not. Maybe that's not for me. But the Lord is working on my heart and growing and expanding things. And I like that exclusivity aspect of it too, like seeing something that not a lot of people get to see. So who knows?
Hey, if you're willing to do 10 miles, there's a lot you can see. So that's hiking. Oh,
that's
girl.
Round trip. That's kind of round trip.
Still, that's more than most people will do. So
that's fair.
You're on the right track. So out of all of your travels and getting to go and see some really beautiful places, where has been a place that just really holds a special place in your heart?
I would just have to say Glacier National Park. That's where I did my first creatives retreat. It was kind of like a beta kind of retreat where, I just kind of sold the tickets at cost, was just trying out the whole retreat building thing. And the time I got to spend there with the girls I got to go with was just so special. And I really learned a lot about experiencing the Lord through creation in that way. So I'm probably going to talk about that for like a lot of this podcast. There's so much to share, and it was such a gift, but it's really special to me. And I think as I go forward and keep building these retreats and keep exploring national parks, I started like a little backpack where I put a bunch of, that's another souvenir. I like to get little patches from each place I go, especially national parks. As I add more patches to my backpack, I think I'll always just hold Glacier National Park in a special place.
Yeah, Glacier is a really special place for a lot of different reasons, just the scenery alone and the diversity in the ecosystems. And it is just it's kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a unicorn in the outdoor world because it has so many unique features that you don't find in other places. And so I love Glacier as well. I think it is a super awesome place and just love that national park. So talk to us a little bit about, I know you said that you could probably spend a lot of time talking about it, but let's talk about it, about how the outdoors plays a role in your relationship with Christ.
It definitely makes me tangibly realize how great God is and how magnificent but intentional his creation is. And all of those things exist so beautifully when it's like laid out there in front of you. And yet, like, the Lord chose me, designed me, kept me for himself, and desires a relationship with me. Like, the fact that God is so great yet so intentional, and that those things exist at the same time in the same God, is just, it really hits me when I'm somewhere like on a hike and I would see all these mountains ahead of me, and it literally looked like a painting. Like, it wasn't even real. Like, I couldn't even fathom like all of the goodness that I was seeing and the beauty. I literally felt like it wasn't real. And to know that that's only a glimpse of like what heaven's going to be like, first of all, it's only a small glimpse. We only get glimpses of heaven in the earthly landscape. And to experience that, and to also know that God created me and knows me and loves me so deeply, man, that feeling just washing over me whenever I experience the outdoors or a beautiful place is just, there's nothing like it. I just feel like I really get to experience God in that way, and like, yeah, feeling fully known and fully loved at the same time, but in a different way because you're put in perspective of this vast landscape in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I think that's so true. And it's a really good ending there, being fully known and fully loved and how it's so different than our everyday life because of the perspective of the great outdoors. So thank you so much for sharing that. So you've talked about Glacier National Park and some of these big trips out west, but you do live in Jackson, Tennessee, which is not quite in the mountains. It's not quite like where I grew up in Kansas, being in the Midwest, but can you share some practical ways that you connect with God through creation on maybe an everyday or weekly basis that would be helpful for someone who maybe lives in a more urban environment?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that Jackson is an urban environment because there's still a lot of places that I can do a nice engagement session. There's a lot of surprising outdoor areas near where I live. But I will say that it's not necessarily how you experience creation, but what you do with what you already have. There's, so much to be said about even going in your backyard and getting vitamin D, because I spend most of my days at my computer editing photos. And I get so crammed in the mindset of like, oh, I've got to get this next thing done. I've got to do this. And I'm like, I have not seen the sun or touched grass all day. And even something as simple as that for me is always super helpful. I love incorporating outdoor spaces, parks, finding new places near me that I can experience with friends instead of just on my own. So instead of going on an outing with a friend where we'll go to a coffee shop or go thrifting, which are kind of like two of my favorite things to do with friends, I'll say, oh, let's go on a walk instead. Let's have lunch outside and pick a park or somewhere we can go so that we're still experiencing the outdoors in some way. Even if it's not like mountains ahead of me, there's still so much to experience where I am. Even though it's flat, even though it's completely flat, there's not a mountain in sight. And I wish that there was. Even just, laying in the grass, feeling the sun on your face and knowing that the Lord created this for you to enjoy. There's so much to be said about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love what you said. What do you do with what you already have? And we all have sun and we all have the ground. And so we can absolutely all experience that as long as we're intentional about connecting that to the Creator.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So switching gears into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you to share a valley or a season of wilderness that you experienced and just what God maybe taught you or prepared you for in that season.
The main thread that I can kind of follow throughout my whole life, and I've only been alive for 24 years, y'all. There's so much more life to live, was that I am really designed for community, and I've gone through seasons of wanting it so desperately, begging the Lord for community, waiting on it, and then eventually building it. I moved around a lot when I was younger, not because I was not raised in a military family or anything. It's just my dad had a few different jobs growing up, so We moved when I was really young, like 6, and then again when I was 11, and then again when I was 20. My parents moved away from my home. I went to college out of state. So there's at least 3 or 4 discernible times in my life where I felt like I've had absolutely no community because I've been in a new place. And even at the one where I was 11 years old and living in a new place, I desperately wanted to find real friendships and real community. And I would pray that God would give it to me. And feeling like that emptiness and that loneliness is really hard. And it's something that I've experienced recently as someone who just moved to a new place. It's something I experienced a few years ago when I started college in a new state. It's something that has, like I said, been a thread throughout my whole life, where I have known that that God is with me in that, and that if I don't have any friends, that's okay because God's going to be my best friend. But it's still like really hard when I'm like actually lonely in my day-to-day life. And in certain seasons like that, like I've seen the Lord deliver me through that, and random friendships and community will pop up out of nowhere. Sometimes I just force them and push them myself, and those typically do not work out. Sometimes they do, but usually they don't when I try to do things on my own. But the consistent faithfulness of God in that, He knows me very well. Of course, He knows me better than anybody else. He knows me better than my husband. He knows me better than my parents. He knows me better than anybody. And He knows that I am such a deeply relational person and such an extreme extrovert. I'm not like this that much anymore since I married my husband, who's an extreme introvert. He's taught me that, it's okay to have an evening in where something's not on the social calendar. But for a lot of my life, I've always been like, go, 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 develop as many relationships as possible. But drawing back to where I am now, the Lord throughout my whole life has really been teaching me that true community is found in Him. He sustained the Trinity as community within Himself. And if I just rely on and lean into Him, that He will bring abundance in relationships, whether that means I have 1 friend, I have 16 friends, or I have 0. Not just that the Lord is my best friend, but He's going to sustain me through every season. Not just that He knows me better than anybody else, but He knows who's just around the corner, And I think that's a big reason why He's given me these retreats to steward, because they are primarily about finding Christian community in the photography industry. It's a very secular environment for a lot of people. I've tried to find relationships within the photography community on my own, and sometimes it just gets so defeating because you're either finding people who feel like they're in competition with you, so they're not going to form a deep relationship with you. Their values aren't aligned with yours, they're not like your church buddy either, because they're not local usually. Like I've got photography friends that are in Ohio, and it's hard to do life with people in the same industry when you're like a service-based industry like that, like I said, because it's a lot of people preach the topic of like community over competition, and that's true for some who have that mindset, but for a lot of people in the photography industry, it's just not the case. And as someone that's a deep part of my story, I'm very relational. I used to try to make as many friends as possible, but now I'm just trying to draw those in who have that same desire to have deep relationships and to connect with them. And I just feel like I'm going on a tangent now, but I definitely feel like that's why the Lord has given me these retreats to steward, just because that's such a big part of like who I am today and the way that He's formed me into being more like Himself.
Yeah. I think what you shared about, being designed for community, I think that is so true. And I think we are all built that way. And that is why we crave intimacy in relationships and feeling close to people. And, I think that we do best when we are in community, because we can, push each other forward and we can become better through community. But I think, the opposite can be true. We can become worse because of our community. And so who you surround yourself with matters. And I think that it is beautiful that you have seen a need in a community of photographers, and you have gone and created that community. I think that that is so special and so unique, and I think so needed, because I know that I've been encouraged working around people that are believers and people that I do have that in common with, versus, working on the opposite end of that spectrum. And there's just a lot that can happen whenever you guys are aligned in that way. And so I would love for you to share just kind of how being aligned with photographers in that way has maybe made you a better photographer or made you a better businesswoman.
Yeah. I think the main premise of it is that because we're not seeing each other as competition, or because we're not trying to gatekeep our stuff, I can have like-minded business conversations with friends that I've gone on retreats with, or with friends that I've just met, and we're like, we have that foundation where we love photography, we love Jesus, boom, that's it. And we can have really candid business conversations about serving people well, because I feel like when you're a Christian photographer, it's not just about the money, it's really just about serving people and celebrating people above all else. And so you kind of walk into business-minded conversations like, how do I serve this couple best when they're walking through this hard season? Or I'm really overextended. What are some ways that you think, I'm on the phone with somebody saying this, what are some ways that you think that I could kind of find rest but also serve people well? And one of the ways I've encouraged other photographers to do that, and some photographers have encouraged me, is keeping a Sabbath. That's something that is kind of common in Christian circles, but I feel like is super ultra important for photographers, is to take one day a week where they're not booking, not editing, not doing anything, and truly just recharging their creative juices for the next day. I do that every Sunday, try. And the main point is that we can really just have candid conversations about business and incorporate Christ into that, and not be selfish about it, but really just seek to serve the other photographer in the equation, to help them out, to give them a leg up so that they can be the best photographer they can be. Because being a Christian photographer, I know that all of my weddings that I get to serve, all my inquiries that come in, every opportunity that I have comes from Christ. I don't run ads. I don't do a lot of advertising, which is kind of a bad thing. Honestly, it's just I haven't had the time to do it, but it's kind of made me think the Lord genuinely brings people my way and makes that connection for me. Seriously, he brings the bookings so that I'm connected with the right people. I serve the weddings that I'm supposed to serve, because ultimately I'm not just serving people, I'm serving him first. And my business isn't my business, it's his. And if I'm talking to another photographer who has that mindset, we have that foundation of our business in Christ, then everything else that we do is just kind of an outpouring of what he's already done in us and through us.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's a huge, huge perspective to have. Really important. I think that, it's not ours, whatever it is, it's not ours, it's God's. And the fact that you have that perspective, I think is so beautiful. And I think that that is so important, because it does change the way that we view everything, and it changes the way that we do business, and it changes the way that we just, do everything.
It primarily just changes the way I steward the business, because I know that the Lord's given me gifts, opportunities, and time, essentially. And I'm using that to serve him. I think I was walking with my husband one day and really frustrated about the amount of bookings I wasn't getting for the next year. And I was just I don't know what I'm going to do. And the thing is about my business, and he literally stopped me right there. He was like, it is not your business. It's the Lord's business that you are stewarding. And I was like, it really convicted me for a second. And honestly, like I had like a lot of things turning in my heart at that point, because I was like, but it is my business. Like I built it from the ground up. I use it with my talents. Like people want to book me for their wedding because of what I can provide and what I can give. But the way I've shifted that is like, no, God is Jireh, our provider. He's brought all of those things so that I can just steward and serve what he's already given me. And that's definitely been like a hard thing to consider and a hard thing to remind myself when I am in a super busy season, like I am right now with wedding season. Or if I'm in a not busy season, I'm in a dry season, I can't even book a single thing. I know that God is my provider in all things, especially my business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. And I think that goes back to, what I was saying earlier, like who you're around matters. And the fact that your husband, pointed you to that. I think, this is not about marriage and this is not a topic on who we decide to marry, but that was a huge point for him, in stewarding your marriage, and, why it's important that we are engaged, even just in relationship or community with godly people, because they're going to give us those reminders that we need. And so kudos to your husband for stepping in and sharing that with you and bringing you back down.
Yeah. Yep.
So you brought up something, it was in your bio about your retreats. You've brought it up again in this conversation, and I would really love for you to elaborate and chat more a little bit about it. You mentioned that you created these retreats so that photographers can find rest. And you brought up keeping a Sabbath. And I think that, you mentioned that that is a pretty common thing in Christian culture. I would err on the side of, I don't know very many people that do keep the Sabbath very well. And so I would love for you to share just with the listeners what that looks like and how you're able to take the time to step back, because I think we live in such a go, gotta do more, gotta hustle, gotta keep up world. And so I'd love for you to share just kind of like what that looks like and kind of how it has maybe changed the way you do business.
Yeah, I'm so super passionate about this. It's not even funny. So Sabbath is something that I started in college, actually. I was in kind of like a Christian book club of some sort. And it was kind of a thing that everybody agreed to do. And it's something that helped me tremendously because I had to set that boundary, not work for a full day. And when you're a student, it's kind of much like being an entrepreneur, like owning your own business, because it's like every time you have idle time, you always have the opportunity to do something that is coming up, that is on your calendar. So like as a photographer, I'm full time. And when I wake up in the morning, whether it's at 7 or it's at 8, as soon as I wake up, I have the opportunity to start work right away and to work towards the next thing that I'm doing. And it never truly ends until I'm like asleep. And when you're in a mindset of like, oh, sleep is the only time that I get to rest, that is called burnout. And burnout is not it's not an eventual state that you reach. It's a continual mindset that you're in. And so it's not really like a burnt out, like past tense, it's like burning out. And I've been there as a student and I've been there as a photographer as well, where I'm just constantly under the pressure of the things that I have to do in my task list. And I'm never fully free from it, except for when I'm literally asleep. So Sabbath has been a way that I've been able to, it doesn't matter how much I have to do. It truly does not. I have to take Sunday. And I cannot do anything. I started recently locking my social media apps for Sunday too. that's just like a side thing. And it's been a great opportunity to just know, okay, Sunday, I'm not doing anything. And it's been so freeing and so rewarding. A way that I've been able to keep that is to not book weddings on Sundays, which is kind of a recent thing. I still have a few more that I've already previously booked, but not having to do a wedding on a Sunday is really important because it's just, that's a whole day of work that isn't editing or isn't like I can't be home, and rest. But another thing is just not make anything due on Monday, because if something's due on Monday, then you're going to feel inclined to do that on a Sunday or things like that. I mean, when I was a student and I would do Sabbath, I would have a lot of work to do Sunday night, so that would kind of be harder. But even in a situation where something is to be done on Sunday night, or if you have an event or something to go to, then even do a 24-hour Sabbath is really important. So like I would do like a 6 p.m. on a Saturday to a 6 p.m. on a Sunday, where I set that intentional time aside. And I think that's the main point, is that you have to be intentional and set that time aside, not do anything. And then as soon as 6 p.m. happens, get everything done that you need to do. And even that has been so helpful and so important. And I think the way that ties into retreats is that when you're on a photography retreat or even any work-related retreat, the mindset is often like, we're here for work. Or in photography, I'm here to create or get content at bucket list locations that I've always wanted to do. Like, I'm here and I'm seeing the world through photos. And I think something that's so important about the retreats that I'm planning is that that is not the main focus. Like, yes, we still get to photograph these amazing places. We get to stretch our creative muscle, but that is not the point of the retreat. The point is to connect with God's creation, and the point is to take a break. Seriously take a break. One thing that we did in the glacier retreat, which I found super helpful, I think the morning of, I had just done like a little devo with everybody about, it was like a section of The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. Basically, the premise of the little vignette, or the chapter essentially, was that this artist was trying to paint these mountains. And if you know anything about this, C.S. Lewis and The Great Divorce, the point of the story is that a bunch of ghosts go to heaven, but each one of them essentially has a vice that prevents them from actually meeting God. Not sure if it's not 100% theologically sound, but it makes a good point in a lot of chapters. So this ghost in particular was an artist, and she wants to paint the mountains that she sees in front of her in heaven. And she eventually is trying to be convinced by another ghost to go up to heaven, and the other ghost is trying to make her understand that that's not what she's there for. She's not there to paint the mountains. She's there to enjoy them for the Lord's sake. And I incorporated that into a devotional for everyone for the glacier retreat, for the purpose of just being like, we're here to enjoy God's creation first and capture it second. And when we are fully enjoying God's creation, first we will find rest in that, and then worry about the photos later. So one helpful thing that we would do when we were on a hike in a beautiful area, when the tendency was to pull out our camera or pull out our phone and immediately capture the landscape in front of us, we would take 4 seconds. And we held each other accountable for most of the week, and we would say, if we were in the middle of a shoot or everything was crazy and someone would just enjoy something in nature, like notice something, they would literally shout out to everybody else, okay, everybody, 4 seconds. And we would face whatever beautiful mountains we were facing and literally count to 4 so that we could take it all in and then go back to what we were doing, take a picture of it or anything. I think holding each other accountable in that way really helped us tangibly enjoy creation in a way that we wouldn't if we were just there for the sole purpose of taking photos. And it allowed us to incorporate a restful mindset because, just enjoying creation in and of itself is super restful, super relaxing. And being able to make that our first thing instead of taking photos as our first thing, our first priority, really shifted the retreat and gave so much life to it in a way that I couldn't even imagine. And I definitely think that the retreats as a whole, even though we will always get amazing pictures from the end of it, that if I were to plan a retreat and no one was to take a single photo, my hope is that they would get the same out of it regardless, if that makes sense. So if I were planning a photography retreat out to, let's say, Yosemite. Let's say we were going out to Yosemite and everybody forgot their cameras on their way there. And we were all just in Yosemite, no cameras, nothing. My hope and my prayer is that everybody there at the retreat would get the same amount out of it as if they did bring all of their gear and more. So that's kind of the point.
Yeah. I think what you said was really valuable of giving them the space to and prompt to, hey, don't make your first reaction be to take a picture. Rest in this moment and then do the thing, whatever the thing is. And I think that could be so applicable to all areas of our life. And I think that's a really good thing that you incorporated into that, because we always think, oh, it's, whatever our job is, we got to do that first, and it's like, no, we need to honor God first with whatever we're doing. And we need to bring the intentionality, like you're saying, to Him and honor Him and enjoy Him first and foremost. So you obviously have created a community through these retreats. And I know that may not be everybody's gifting, or may not even be in people's radar to do. And I know that you said you struggled with community. So can you share with us and just leave maybe a piece of advice for someone who's struggling to find community, a piece of advice on how to find community, maybe even if they're not capable of building it?
Yeah. I think this is a very good question for me, because I just moved to a completely new city just a year ago and struggled the first few months of not knowing anybody. I at least, found other photographers in the area that I connected with. And some of those relationships stuck and some of those, didn't as much. But I think if I were to give a piece of practical advice, I would say be more intentional to get to know people as much as you can before not letting yourself be known. But at every turn, if you meet someone new, ask them questions about themselves. I know it sounds so simple and so silly, but people, when given the opportunity to be known, they're more than likely going to give you the opportunity. So just create space to where you can be intentional and get to know somebody. Not just asking them to coffee, asking them, so where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? And not to necessarily to skip to the deep stuff either, to be like, okay, so what's the major trauma in your life? But to do something kind of in the middle to where you're like, hey, I see potential community in you. Don't say that to somebody, but to have that mindset and say, would you like to hang out sometime? That's just a me thing though. I am personally will talk to anybody, will make a friend wherever I go. And I think that's something that the Lord has gifted me to do. And a lot of people are like, I could literally never talk to a stranger on the airplane. And I love talking to strangers on the airplane. I am weird. But I think there's something to be said about literally just talking to people and getting to know them and being intentional in that way, because people will see intentionality and reward that with a response. They will see that you genuinely care and want relationship, and will reward that with reciprocation. And if they don't, then they don't, and that's their loss, because they're missing out on connection just as much as you are. And so I think that would be my major piece of advice, is to just be focused on connection and be intentional wherever possible to truly get to know people, and to see them, and to see them how God sees them, and to ask them what God's doing in their lives, if this is, Christian circle, Christian community, and to listen. A lot of people ask questions and they do not listen. They're really thinking about the next thing that they're going to say. And so I would challenge that person, if given an opportunity to listen, to try their best to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, it made me think of something that a friend said to me a few years ago. He said, you may impress people with your strengths, but you connect with them through your vulnerability. And I think that so often when we go to find community, we want to tell them about ourselves, and we want to make them want to be friends with us. And I think so much you have to be interested in the other person. And so I think that that's what you're saying, get to know them, really dive in, take an interest in getting to know them, not just sharing about yourself, and listening, and all the things that you just said, I think are all super valuable in finding and strengthening community, and just putting yourself out there. I think so often people are they're scared that somebody's going to be like, no, I don't want to hang out with you. And you know what? That's okay. Not everybody's going to be your friend.
Yeah.
And you said a long time ago in this podcast about how you used to try to have as many friends as possible, and you would hang out with everybody. And sometimes there is quality over quantity is very true. And so actually developing relationships, and not just trying to have as many friends as you can, but actually being intentional to dive into those friendships, because you're only going to reap what you sow in those friendships. And if you're just throwing a bunch of seeds and you forget to go and water them all, guess what? They're not going to grow. And so I think that's the piece that that so many people.
That's so good.
So many people, do. And I've been guilty of that. I think we all have at some point, but I think it truly is the grass is going to be green where you water it. And so actually dive in, be intentional, and foster relationships. So good. Well, Dana, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing and being willing to hop on this podcast and share a little bit about you and about the retreats that you're doing. And I would love for you to share just where people can find more about your photography business, about these Christian creative retreats.
Yeah. So my personal photography page is Dana Photo Co. So that's my name, Dana, and then Photo Co. And then the creatives page, we have our own Instagram. It's Creatives for the Creator, and then with an underscore. And they're pretty easy to find. If you find my page, you'll find the creatives page. It's in my bio. And I highly encourage those listening to, if you're a photographer or if you just want to follow along and see all the cool stuff, then we're actually doing 2 retreats next fall, end of summer, early fall. We're going to go to the Pacific Northwest in August, and then we're going to Yosemite in September. I'm super excited. The Pacific Northwest one is going to be a huge road trip. We're going to go through Northern Oregon and all around Washington. And then the Yosemite retreat is going to be a little less of a jam-packed retreat. It's more going to be focused on rest than anything else. Since we're staying in one place, it's going to be more intimate, smaller, with less people than the Pacific Northwest one. And so they're very, very different retreats. I would highly recommend following along. We might even be doing a surprise 3rd retreat earlier in the year, just kind of like a pop-up one, just because I don't want to wait until August to hang out with everybody. So that's kind of it. But I'm kind of just waiting on the Lord for that, because if he's not the one planning it, then I don't want to be a part of it. I've genuinely felt with the Glacier retreat specifically, well, everyone was like, Dana, this is so awesome. I can't believe that you planned this. And I literally would just look at them square in the face and say, the Lord planned it. I just booked my ticket. Seriously. So super excited about those. That's and all the awesome things that the Lord's doing. And just super, super blessed and excited.
Yeah. Well, y'all go follow along, and definitely if you are a photographer or someone in the creative business, go and sign up for those. And if you can't make it to the ones in 2025, just stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be more. But again, just thank you so much, Dana, for being here and for sharing with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.